When a little boy touched a police dog's vest, seconds later, everything stopped. What was meant to be an innocent moment at a community demonstration turned into a heart-stopping scene that left an entire crowd holding their breath. Officer Reeves had only seconds to react as his K-9 partner Titan went completely still, something he'd never seen before. No one could have predicted what would happen next, or how this single touch would change multiple lives forever. The summer fair in Oak Ridge was buzzing with excitement. Children laughed, cotton candy machines whirred, and at the center of it all stood Officer James Reeves and his German Shepherd partner, Titan. Their K-9 unit demonstration had drawn the largest crowd of the day. 7-year-old Max Peterson clutched his mother's hand, eyes wide with wonder. "Can I pet him, Mom? Please?" he begged, pointing at the magnificent dog standing alert beside his handler. "We need to ask permission first," his mother Sarah replied. But as she turned to speak with a neighbor, Max's small hand slipped from hers. The crowd shifted, creating a narrow path between strangers' legs, a perfect tunnel for a determined child. Officer Reeves was mid-sentence explaining Titan's training when he noticed a flash of movement. The crowd had somehow parted, and a small boy was approaching Titan with outstretched hands. James felt his stomach drop. Protocol was clear. No one approaches the K-9 without explicit permission, especially not children. "Wait!" James called out, but his voice was swallowed by the fairground noise. Max was already within arm's reach of Titan, his small fingers extending toward the tactical vest with its warning patches and equipment pouches. What Max didn't know was that touching this dog's vest would trigger a chain of events no one saw coming. Time seemed to slow as Max's fingers hovered just inches from Titan's tactical vest. The black and gray material, adorned with police K-9 patches and Velcro straps, was simply irresistible to a curious 7-year-old who dreamed of becoming an officer himself someday. Officer Reeves saw it happening but couldn't reach them in time. "Stop!" he called out, his voice finally cutting through the ambient noise. Heads turned. Parents gasped. But it was too late. Max's small fingertips made contact with the rough material of Titan's vest, right over the spot where a hidden pocket contained something Officer Reeves had kept secret from everyone on the force. In that moment, Reeves felt his heart hammer against his ribcage. Not because he feared for the boy's safety, but because of what this moment might trigger in Titan. The German Shepherd's ears immediately perked up. His posture shifted. The crowd collectively inhaled, expecting the worst. Officer Reeves had drilled countless hours of training into Titan, teaching him to respond to threats with controlled aggression. But this wasn't a threat. This was a child. And yet, everything stopped. Titan froze completely, his dark eyes locked on the small boy. The dog's muscles tensed beneath his fur, but he made no move forward or backward. It was as if someone had pressed pause on the entire scene. The boy's hand on the vest, the dog's unwavering gaze, the officer's outstretched arm trying to intervene. But the reason Titan reacted this way wasn't just training. It was something far more personal that happened 6 months earlier. The rain pounded mercilessly against the patrol car windows as Officer Reeves and Titan sat in silence, watching the abandoned warehouse. It was supposed to be a routine surveillance operation. But nothing about that night would end up being routine. The rhythmic drumming of water against metal created a hypnotic backdrop to their vigilance, broken only by the occasional crackle of the police radio and Titan's steady breathing. "Just a few more minutes, boy," James whispered, scratching behind Titan's ear. The German Shepherd leaned into his touch, a gesture that had become their silent language over 3 years of partnership. Their bond had been forged through countless patrols, training sessions, and high-stakes situations that tested both man and animal. Tonight felt different somehow. A heaviness in the air that went beyond the storm clouds gathering overhead. James checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. The tip had come in anonymously. Suspected drug activity in this forgotten corner of the industrial district. Standard procedure dictated they maintain visual contact until backup arrived for the planned raid at midnight. The warehouse's broken windows and graffiti-covered walls told the story of urban decay, a once thriving business now serving as a haven for criminal elements. Titan's ears suddenly perked up, his body tensing slightly. James had learned to trust these subtle signals more than any high-tech equipment. The dog sensed something, or someone. The radio crackled. All units, suspect on the move. Approach with caution. Possible armed suspect. The dispatcher's voice carried the controlled urgency that experienced officers recognized as a warning sign. This wasn't just about drugs anymore. Copy that. James responded quietly, his breath fogging the cold window. K9 unit moving into position. James felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as he exited the vehicle, Titan moving in perfect synchronization beside him. The warehouse loomed dark and foreboding against the stormy sky. Lightning briefly illuminated the rusted sign above the entrance. Oak Ridge Manufacturing, S1967. A relic of the city's more prosperous past, now a shadow of what it once was. They entered through a side door, water dripping from their forms onto the concrete floor. The smell hit them immediately. Dampness, mold, and something chemical that made James instinctively place his hand on his service weapon. Titan's training kept him silent, but his muscles coiled with readiness beneath his wet fur. The interior was a maze of forgotten machinery, collapsed shelving, and shadows deep enough to hide any number of threats. James clicked on his tactical flashlight, keeping the beam low and sweeping methodically. The rain hammered against the metal roof, creating a cacophony that made it difficult to isolate other sounds. Not ideal conditions for an operation like this. Central, this is Officer Reeves. We're inside the east entrance. No visual on suspect yet. He whispered into his shoulder mic. Copy that, Reeves. Backup is 3 minutes out. Maintain position if possible. James nodded to himself. 3 minutes could be an eternity in situations like this. But procedure was procedure. He signaled Titan to heel as they advanced deeper into the warehouse, past rusted assembly lines and overturned workbenches. What happened next would change everything. A flash of movement caught in the periphery of his flashlight beam. James turned sharply, Titan already alert and facing the same direction. A shadow darted between two large industrial machines. Police, stop where you are, James called out, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. Instead of compliance, a shout rang out, followed immediately by the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. James barely had time to dive behind a concrete pillar before the first shot rang out, the muzzle flash briefly illuminating a figure in a dark hoodie. Titan growled low, training keeping him from barking, but every muscle ready for the command to pursue. James reached for his radio to update dispatch when a second shot exploded through the air. He felt a searing pain in his shoulder as he fell backward, the impact driving the air from his lungs. His flashlight clattered away, spinning crazily across the floor and casting disorienting beams of light across the warehouse. Officer down. He managed to gasp into his radio, the metallic taste of blood filling his mouth. Whether from biting his tongue in the fall or something worse, he couldn't tell. Titan immediately positioned himself between his fallen handler and the danger, his protective instinct overriding all training. The German Shepherd's silhouette stood firm and unwavering, a sentinel between James and whoever had fired the shot. His growl deepened, no longer restrained by training protocols. This was primal, a clear warning to the attacker. James tried to push himself up with his good arm, his vision swimming. The pain radiated from his shoulder down to his fingertips, hot and insistent. "Tighten guard," he commanded, his voice weaker than he intended, but still clear enough for his partner to understand. The suspect emerged from behind a stack of crates, weapon still raised. The dim emergency lights that somehow still functioned in the abandoned building revealed a young man, perhaps early 20s, with a gaunt face and desperate eyes. The gun in his hand wavered slightly. Inexperience, fear, or perhaps substances affecting his motor control. But before he could fire again, a small figure darted out from nowhere. A child, no older than 7, with wide, frightened eyes and tousled hair, who had been hiding in the warehouse. The boy stumbled into the open space between James and the gunman, frozen like a deer in headlights. "Tommy, get back here!" A woman's panicked voice called from somewhere in the shadows. The tableau froze in that moment. Officer Reeves bleeding against the pillar, Titan poised to attack, the armed suspect with finger on trigger, and an innocent child standing in the crossfire. Rain continued to pour through the broken skylights, creating puddles that reflected the scene like fractured mirrors. The gunman hesitated, his weapon wavering between the officer, the dog, and now the unexpected child. Conflict played across his features. Whatever crime he was involved in, he hadn't planned on endangering a child. That split second of humanity was his undoing. It was all the distraction Titan needed. The K9 launched, forward in a blur of fur and focused determination, crossing the distance in what seemed like a heartbeat. His training took over, not going for the throat as some might expect, but for the arm holding the weapon. 80 pounds of muscle and precision clamped down on the suspect's wrist, forcing a scream and causing the gun to discharge once more into the ceiling before clattering to the ground. The suspect went down hard, Titan maintaining his hold with unwavering discipline. The sound of sirens grew louder outside, backup finally arriving. James struggled to his feet, pressing his hand against his bleeding shoulder. "Tommy." The woman's voice came again, and from behind a defunct conveyor belt emerged a thin, haggard-looking woman who rushed to gather the child in her arms. Homeless, James realized. The warehouse had become their shelter from the storm. In the chaos that followed, paramedics rushing in, officers securing the scene, the suspect being handcuffed and led away. James noticed something remarkable. When the child approached Titan afterward, visibly terrified but somehow sensing the dog had protected him, the normally vigilant police dog completely relaxed. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable to someone who knew Titan as well as James did. The German Shepherd, still on duty and typically maintaining professional distance from civilians, allowed the small hand to rest on his tactical vest. The child's mother watched nervously from where paramedics were checking her for injuries, but Titan made no move to pull away. His eyes, usually scanning for threats, remained gentle as the boy's fingers traced the police K9 patch. "He saved me," the boy whispered, looking up at James with eyes too old for his young face. "Your dog is a hero." That night, as James sat in the hospital having his shoulder wound treated, he couldn't stop thinking about that moment of connection between Titan and the child. Something profound had happened in that warehouse, something that transcended training manuals and police protocols. After his release, during his mandatory leave period, Officer Reeves made a decision. He carefully sewed a small pocket into Titan's vest, right where the child had touched him, and placed inside a small memento from that warehouse, a button from the child's coat that had fallen off in the commotion, a reminder that sometimes the fiercest protectors need to know when to stand down, when to show compassion rather than aggression. The department psychologist would have called it anthropomorphizing or projecting human qualities onto an animal trained for police work. But James knew better. He had seen something awaken in Titan that night, an understanding that went beyond conditioning and commands, a recognition that sometimes innocence needs protection more than justice needs serving. And so the secret pocket remained, known only to handler and dog, a talisman of sorts, carrying the weight of that rainy night and the lesson it had taught them both. Back at the summer fair in Oak Ridge, time resumed its normal pace as Officer Reeves watched the impossible unfold before him. Titan, the dog who had taken down armed suspects without hesitation, stood perfectly still as Max's small hand rested on his tactical vest, directly over the hidden pocket. The summer heat pressed down on the fairgrounds, the scent of cotton candy and popcorn hanging in the air, creating a surreal backdrop for what should have been a tense situation. The demonstration area had been carefully cordoned off with yellow police tape, a precaution James had personally insisted upon after years of experience with public events. K-9 demonstrations always drew crowds, especially families with children, but maintaining a safe distance was protocol for good reason. Even the most well-trained police dogs could be unpredictable in chaotic environments filled with unfamiliar sounds and scents. "Max!" Sarah Peterson's voice cut through the crowd as she pushed her way forward, panic evident in her eyes. Her sundress fluttered with her rushed movements as she navigated between fairgoers. "I'm so sorry, officer. He just slipped away from me. One second he was holding my hand, and the next..." Her voice trailed off as she registered the scene before her. Her son's hand on a police dog, and yet no disaster unfolding. James held up a reassuring hand. "It's okay, ma'am. Everything is fine." His voice was calm, but his eyes never left the connection between boy and dog. He could feel his heart hammering against his ribcage, not from fear of what Titan might do, but from the remarkable thing he was already doing: nothing. The crowd, which had collectively held its breath expecting disaster, now murmured in confusion. K-9 units weren't supposed to allow civilian contact during demonstrations, especially not from children who approached without permission. Several of James's colleagues exchanged puzzled glances. Officer Martinez, who had been narrating the demonstration through a handheld microphone, had fallen silent, unsure how to explain the breach in protocol to the audience. Captain Reynolds, standing at the edge of the demonstration area, frowned deeply. He had always been a stickler for regulations, and this situation was veering dangerously off script. His hand hovered near his radio, perhaps contemplating whether to call for assistance. Though what kind of assistance would be needed in this peculiar standoff was unclear. Max looked up at Titan with pure wonder, completely oblivious to the tension surrounding him. The boy's baseball cap cast a shadow over his eyes, but couldn't hide the expression of awe on his freckled face. "He's so big," the boy whispered, his voice carrying in the strange hush that had fallen. "But he's not scary." Titan's posture had completely transformed. The alert, duty-ready stance had melted into something gentler. His ears, normally erect and attentive, relaxed slightly. The change would be imperceptible to most observers, but to James, it spoke volumes. The dog's breathing remained even, his tail held in a neutral position, not the stiff alertness of working mode, nor the relaxed wag of play, but something in between that James had rarely witnessed. "His name is Titan," James said, kneeling down beside the boy while keeping one hand on his partner's lead. The leather felt warm and familiar in his grip, a tether between duty and the unexpected moment unfolding before him. And you're right. He can be fierce when he needs to be. But he also knows when someone just wants to be friends. A bead of sweat trickled down James's back beneath his uniform. The tactical vest felt heavier than usual in the summer heat, a reminder of the weight of responsibility he carried. He was acutely aware of the eyes on him, not just the public's, but his fellow officers. This moment would be discussed in the break room for weeks to come, analyzed and picked apart for what he did right or wrong. Sarah reached them, apology written across her features. The floral perfume she wore mingled with the scent of sunscreen on her arms as she cautiously approached. "I'm so sorry about this. Max is obsessed with police dogs. He has posters in his room and everything. He watches those police K9 shows on TV every weekend." She laughed nervously, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "I should have known he'd try something like this." "No harm done," James replied, though he knew questions would come later from his supervisor. Protocol existed for a reason, and he had just allowed a major breach of it. The department had strict policies about public interactions with K9 officers, policies written in response to incidents far less pleasant than this one. But something told him this moment mattered more than regulations. Max's hand remained on Titan's vest, his small fingers tracing the embroidered Police K9 patch with reverence. "Does he live with you? Does he have his own room? Does he eat dog food or people food?" The questions tumbled out in the unfiltered way that only children can manage. James couldn't help but smile. "He does live with me. He has his own bed. But sometimes he prefers the couch when we're watching TV. And he eats special food that helps him stay strong and healthy for his job." "Can I be a K9 officer when I grow up?" Max asked, his hand still resting on Titan's vest, directly above the secret pocket where the button from the warehouse child's coat remained hidden. The coincidence wasn't lost on James. Another child, another moment of unexpected connection. James smiled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "It takes a lot of hard work and training, both for you and for your dog partner. You have to learn to communicate without words sometimes, to trust each other completely." "I'm not afraid of hard work," the boy declared with the certainty only a 7-year-old could muster, his chin lifting with determination. "And I'm really good at talking to dogs. My mom says I speak dog better than people sometimes." Sarah laughed, the sound genuine this time, her earlier panic subsiding. "It's true. He has conversations with every dog in the neighborhood. The Wilsons' retriever waits for him at their fence every day after school." Officer Martinez, seemingly recovering his professional composure, approached carefully. "Perhaps we should continue with the demonstration," he suggested quietly to James, glancing meaningfully at the waiting crowd. James nodded, but before he could guide Max back to his mother, the boy looked up with earnest eyes. "Can I ask him one more question?" Something in the child's expression made James pause. "Sure, but make it quick. Titan has to get back to showing everyone how he helps keep the city safe." Max leaned in closer to the German shepherd, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that James could barely hear. "Do you remember the other boy? The one from the warehouse? My dad says you saved him." James felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. The fair, the crowd, even the summer heat seemed to recede as he processed the boy's words. How could Max know about the warehouse incident? The details had been kept out of the press, especially the presence of the homeless mother and child. Before he could formulate a response, Max continued, "My dad's a paramedic. He was there that night. He told me how brave you both were." The boy's hand patted Titan's vest once more. He said some heroes have badges and some have paws. The simplicity of the statement, delivered with childlike sincerity, caught James off guard. He had never considered his actions that night heroic, just necessary, a part of the job. But hearing it reflected back through a child's perspective cast everything in a different light. "Your dad sounds like a wise man," James finally managed, his voice slightly hoarse. "And he's a hero too, you know. Paramedics save lives every day." Max nodded solemnly. "That's what Mom always says." Sarah smiled apologetically. "His father, David Peterson, he works with Oak Ridge Emergency Services. He was on shift that night at the warehouse. He doesn't usually discuss his calls with Max, but that one, well, it made an impression." The name clicked into place in James's memory. The paramedic who had treated his shoulder wound on scene, a steady presence amid the chaos. The man had worked efficiently, his conversation minimal but reassuring. James hadn't realized he was a father, though in retrospect, he remembered noticing a child's drawing peeking from the paramedic's breast pocket. As the demonstration concluded and the crowd began to disperse, families drifting back toward the carnival rides and food stalls, Officer Reeves' supervisor approached, clipboard in hand and concern etched on his face. Captain Reynolds had been with the department for 27 years, his salt and pepper hair and perpetual squint giving him the appearance of someone constantly evaluating a situation for potential problems. "What happened out there, Reeves? You know the protocol about civilian contact during demonstrations." The captain's voice was measured, professional, but the undertone of disapproval was unmistakable. His pen tapped against the clipboard rhythmically, a nervous habit James had observed during numerous briefings. James nodded, standing at attention out of ingrained respect. "Yes, sir." The situation developed quickly, but Titan assessed there was no threat. I made a judgment call based on his response. "Assessed? He's a dog, not a detective," the supervisor said, though his tone held more curiosity than reprimand. He glanced down at Titan, who had resumed his alert posture now that Max and his mother had rejoined the crowd. "I've never seen him so docile with a stranger, especially a child who approached unexpectedly. Your dog has a reputation for being one of our most focused K-9 officers. This seems out of character." James's hand unconsciously moved to the spot on Titan's vest, where the secret pocket lay hidden. The small bulge was imperceptible to anyone who didn't know it was there, but to James, it might as well have been glowing. Sometimes experience is the best teacher, sir. For both of us. Captain Reynolds studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he sighed, making a notation on his clipboard. "The department psychologist would have a field day with this, Reeves, but I can't argue with results. No harm, no foul, this time." He tapped his pen against the clipboard once more. "But I expect a full report on my desk tomorrow morning explaining exactly what happened and why you believe Titan responded the way he did. The training division will want to review this incident." "Yes, sir. I understand." As the captain walked away, Officer Martinez approached, a bemused expression on his face. "Man, I thought you were toast when that kid breached the perimeter. I've seen Titan in action during training exercises. He doesn't usually do gentle with surprise encounters." James shrugged, unwilling to elaborate on his private theories about Titan's behavior. "He's smarter than people give him credit for. He knew the boy wasn't a threat." Martinez shook his head, clearly not entirely convinced. "If you say so. But if my K9 ever pulls something like that, I'm requesting a full veterinary workup. He clapped James on the shoulder. Anyway, despite the unexpected drama, I think the demonstration was a hit. The crowd ate it up, especially that takedown scenario with the padded suit. You heading back to the station now? Yeah, shift's almost over. Paperwork awaits. James gestured toward the parking area. You? Got another hour of fair duty, making sure teenagers don't sneak behind the Ferris wheel to make out. Martinez rolled his eyes. The glamorous life of law enforcement. As they walked back to the patrol car, navigating through the fairground with its colorful tents and vendor stalls, James noticed a small figure waving enthusiastically from across the way. Max stood beside his mother at a lemonade stand, beaming with excitement and admiration. The boy's free hand made a gesture that mimicked a salute, though it looked more like a wave. Sarah Peterson nodded respectfully in their direction, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. You made quite an impression today, James told Titan as they climbed into the vehicle. The air conditioning was a welcome relief from the summer heat as it kicked in. On more than just that boy. Titan looked at him with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand far more than anyone gave him credit for. The German shepherd settled into his specially designed compartment, a space engineered for both safety and comfort during patrol. His breathing was steady, calm, the breathing of an animal at peace with his place in the world. In that moment, James knew that the memento hidden in the vest had served its purpose. Not as a charm or superstition, but as a reminder that sometimes the most important police work happened in the smallest moments of connection. The button from a child's coat, a seemingly insignificant object, had become something more. A talisman representing the balance between duty and compassion, between the letter of the law and its spirit. As he pulled out of the fairground parking lot, James found himself thinking about the report he would need to write. How could he possibly explain what had happened today? The official forms had no boxes to check for dog-sensed special connection or handler's intuition overrode protocol. Yet he knew that today's incident would need to be documented, analyzed, perhaps even used for future training scenarios. The radio crackled with routine updates from dispatch, a fender bender on Main Street, a shoplifting report at the mall, the ECA, everyday rhythm of small city law enforcement. James responded automatically, his mind still processing the events at the fair. What neither of them could know was that this chance encounter at a summer fair would lead to something that would change not only their lives, but the entire K9 program in ways no one could have predicted. The seed had been planted, a moment of unexpected connection between a boy, a dog, and a secret carried in a hidden pocket. In the weeks and months to come, that seed would grow into something remarkable, challenging assumptions and opening new possibilities for how police dogs could serve their communities. As they turned onto the road leading back to the station, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement. Titan shifted in his compartment, his attention focused forward as always, alert, ready, but somehow different. Something had awakened in him, or perhaps had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. And James, watching his partner in the rearview mirror, couldn't help but wonder what other surprises Titan might have in store, and what other secrets might be worth keeping in hidden pockets, carried close to the heart. 3 weeks after the summer fair incident, James sat in Captain Reynolds' office, the air conditioning humming quietly in the background. The captain's desk was cluttered with files, coffee mugs, and a framed photo of his golden retriever, an irony not lost on James, considering the conversation at hand. The training division has reviewed your report, Reynolds said, tapping a folder with the department logo emblazoned on its cover. along with the video footage from the demonstration. They're intrigued. James shifted in his seat. Intrigued, sir? That's the diplomatic term. Reynolds leaned back, his chair creaking slightly under his weight. Baffled might be more accurate. Titan's behavior defied standard K9 response protocols, yet showed remarkable situational assessment. They're calling it adaptive empathy. The term hung in the air between them, unfamiliar yet somehow fitting. James had spent the past weeks replaying the encounter in his mind, trying to make sense of Titan's unprecedented reaction to Max. They want to explore this further, Reynolds continued, opening the folder. The department has approved a pilot program, a collaboration with the Children's Hospital. He slid a document across the desk. They're calling it Pause for Healing. James scanned the proposal, his eyes widening as he absorbed the details. The program would introduce specially selected K9 officers to pediatric patients, children dealing with trauma, extended illnesses, or recovery from major surgeries. The goal was to provide comfort while simultaneously destigmatizing police presence for vulnerable youth. Sir, with all due respect, Titan is a patrol and apprehension specialist. He's not a therapy dog. Reynolds nodded. That's exactly the point, Reeves. No one expected your partner to show the capacity he did with that Peterson boy. It challenges our assumptions about the limitations of police dogs. The training division sees potential here, a way to expand the K9 program's community impact. James thought about the secret pocket in Titan's vest, about the warehouse incident 6 months earlier, about Max's hand resting exactly where that hidden memento lay. Coincidence? He wasn't so sure anymore. The program would require additional training, of course. Reynolds continued. 2 days a week for the next month. You'd still maintain your regular patrol schedule, but with adjustments to accommodate the hospital visits. And if Titan isn't suitable? If the fare was just an anomaly? The captain's expression softened slightly. Then we document it as such and move on. But the training division believes there's something worth exploring here. So do I, for that matter. He gestured to the framed photo on his desk. Dogs surprise us all the time with what they're capable of understanding. Maybe we've been too rigid in how we define their roles. As James left the office, proposal in hand, he found Sergeant Diaz waiting by the water cooler, her expression curious. So, what's the verdict on your miracle dog? She asked, half joking but with genuine interest. James handed her the proposal. Apparently, we're pioneering a new frontier in K9 capabilities. Diaz whistled low as she skimmed the document. Bold move. The old guard won't like it. Blurring the lines between working dogs and therapy animals. She handed the papers back. But if anyone can make it work, it's you two. Later that evening, as James prepared dinner in his modest ranch-style home on the outskirts of town, he watched Titan lounging in the living room, vest and harness removed, just a dog enjoying the simple pleasure of a sunbeam through the window. "What do you think, boy?" he asked, knowing full well the absurdity of expecting an answer. "Ready to add therapist to your resume?" Titan's ears perked up at his handler's voice, head tilting in that characteristic way that always made James smile. For a moment, in the golden light of early evening, James could almost believe they were having a real conversation. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. "Officer Reeves? This is Sarah Peterson, Max's mom. Hope it's okay that I got your number from David's paramedic friend. Max has been asking about Titan nonstop. The department mentioned you might be starting a program at the Children's Hospital. Max's cousin is there. Leukemia treatment. Thought you should know. No pressure. Just seemed like another one of those coincidences." James stared at the message for a long moment, then looked back at Titan, who had now risen and padded over to sit at his feet, as if sensing his handler's sudden shift in mood. Coincidences? James murmured, reaching down to scratch behind Titan's ears. Starting to feel like something else entirely, aren't they? The German shepherd leaned into his touch, eyes closing briefly in contentment. In that simple gesture, James found his answer. Whatever this new path was, wherever it might lead them, they would walk it together, as they had everything else. What began as a hidden pocket carrying a small memento was evolving into something much larger, something with the potential to transform not just their lives, but countless others. The ripples from that rainy night at the warehouse, from that sunny day at the fair, were spreading outward in ways James could never have imagined. And Titan, ever the faithful partner, seemed ready for whatever came next. The children's hospital gleamed in the morning sunlight, its colorful exterior designed to appear welcoming rather than institutional. James parked in the designated visitors area, checking Titan's special new vest one more time before exiting the vehicle. Unlike his tactical police vest, this one was lighter, with therapy K9 patches alongside the standard police insignia, a visual representation of the dual role they were pioneering. The vest looked almost festive in the soft morning light, a stark contrast to the serious work it was intended for. As he stepped out, the cool air hit him, a refreshing change from the warmth of the patrol car. He took a moment to breathe deeply, mentally preparing himself for the day's visits. The past month had been intense. Specialized sessions with animal behaviorists, controlled exposure exercises, and endless evaluations. Titan had excelled beyond anyone's expectations, showing an almost uncanny ability to adjust his demeanor based on each situation. James felt a surge of pride as he thought about how far they had come together. "Remember your training," James murmured as he helped Titan from the vehicle. The past month had been filled with countless hours of preparation, and now it was time to put everything they had learned into practice. He could feel the sense of anticipation building within him. This was more than just a job. It felt like a calling. At the hospital entrance, Dr. Eleanor Chen waited, clipboard in hand and a warm, professional smile in place. As the pediatric psychology director, she had been instrumental in developing the program protocols and ensuring everything was in place for their visits. "Officer Reeves?" she greeted him, then knelt slightly to address Titan directly. "And Officer Titan, right on time." "Good morning, Dr. Chen," James replied, his tone upbeat. "We're ready to get started." Dr. Chen straightened, gesturing toward the building. "We have 5 patients scheduled today, each with different needs and circumstances. We'll start with Zoe. She's 10, recovering from a car accident. Multiple surgeries, significant trauma response. She hasn't spoken much since admission 3 weeks ago." James nodded, processing the information while mentally reviewing the training guidelines for trauma cases. "Any specific triggers we should avoid?" "Loud noises, sudden movements," Dr. Chen replied as they entered the building. The atmosphere was bright yet sterile, with the familiar sense of antiseptic and the occasional waft of something more comforting from the cafeteria. Her file mentioned she had a dog at home, a retriever mix, so we're hoping Titan might help establish a connection. As they walked through the hospital corridors, James couldn't help but notice the bright murals decorating the walls, painted with images of forests and oceans, designed to make the space feel less intimidating for young patients. It was a stark contrast to the clinical environment he was used to. The cheerful colors and whimsical designs were meant to uplift spirits, but beneath the surface, the reality of the hospital hung heavy in the air. Titan walked perfectly at heel, his training evident in every step. Yet James noticed subtle differences from their patrol posture. The dog's head was slightly lower, his pace more measured, ears relaxed rather than alert for threats. The behavioral specialists had called it non-intimidation posturing, a deliberate softening of body language to appear approachable rather than authoritative. They stopped outside room 412, where Dr. Chen knocked gently before entering. "Zoe, you have some special visitors today." The girl in the bed looked smaller than her 10 years, dark hair contrasting sharply with the white hospital linens. Her right leg was elevated in a complex external fixator, and a healing scar traced a line from her temple to her cheek. She didn't speak, but her wide eyes registered shock and curiosity at the sight of Titan. "This is Officer Reeves and his partner Titan," Dr. Chen explained, her voice gentle but not condescending. "They're here as part of our new program. Would it be okay if they visited with you for a little while?" Zoe's eyes remained fixed on Titan, something flickering in their depths, recognition perhaps, or a faint glimmer of hope. After a moment, she gave a tiny nod, though uncertainty lingered in her gaze. James led Titan closer, maintaining enough distance to avoid overwhelming the child. "Titan is a police dog, but today he's here just to meet you. Would you like to say hello to him?" Another nod, slightly more emphatic. "He's very gentle," James continued, keeping his voice soft. "You can pet him if you'd like. Just on the head or back is best." For several long moments, nothing happened. The only sounds in the room were the soft beeping of monitors and the muffled hospital announcements from the hallway. James was about to suggest they give Zoe more time when he saw her hand move. Tentative, trembling slightly, toward Titan's head. The first touch was barely a whisper of contact, just fingertips brushing fur. When Titan remained perfectly still, her confidence seemed to grow. Her palm flattened against his head, then slid to scratch behind his ears. "He's soft," she whispered. The words so quiet James almost missed them. Dr. Chen's professional composure slipped for just a moment, surprise and satisfaction flashing across her features before she regained control. "Yes, he is," she agreed. "Do you think Titan reminds you of your dog at home?" Zoe nodded, her hand continuing to stroke Titan's fur. "Buddy," she said, the name carrying weight and memory. "But Buddy died in the accident." The simple statement contained volumes of grief, delivered with the direct honesty only children seem capable of. James felt something tighten in his chest, a physical response to the emotional weight of her words. "I'm very sorry about Buddy," he said sincerely, meaning it from the depths of his heart. "It's hard to lose someone we love." Zoe looked at him then, really looked at him, as if seeing beyond the uniform to the person wearing it. "Did you ever lose someone you love?" The question caught James off guard. In his training for this program, they had covered many scenarios, but not this. Not a child's direct inquiry into his personal grief. Professional boundaries suggested deflection, but something in Zoe's direct gaze demanded honesty. "Yes," he answered simply, feeling the weight of vulnerability. "My dad, when I was not much older than you, and a good friend a few years ago." Zoe seemed to consider this information, her hand still resting on Titan's head. "Does it stop hurting?" Dr. Chen shifted slightly, perhaps preparing to intervene if the conversation became too intense. But James met her eyes briefly, asking for space to answer. "The hurt changes," he said carefully, choosing his words with care. "It becomes something you carry with you. But it doesn't always feel so sharp. And sometimes we find new connections that help us remember the good parts instead of just the sad ones. As if understanding his role in this moment, Titan gently placed his chin on the edge of the bed, his eyes soft as he looked at Zoe. The girl's fingers found the spot where his neck met his shoulder, scratching gently as if she were trying to soothe both herself and the dog. "I think Buddy would like Titan," she said after a moment, her voice barely a whisper. "He was a good dog, too." "I'm sure he was the best dog," James agreed, his heart aching for her loss. "Maybe someday you could tell me about him. Titan and I will be visiting the hospital regularly, so we could come see you again." Something shifted in Zoe's expression, a tiny spark that hadn't been there before. "You'll come back? If that's okay with you." She nodded, more decisively this time, her eyes brightening just a bit. "I could tell you about the time Buddy stole a whole turkey from the counter at Thanksgiving." James couldn't help but smile. "That sounds like an excellent story. We'd love to hear it next time." As their visit concluded and they prepared to move on to the next patient, Zoe called out softly, "Officer Reeves?" He turned back. "Yes?" "Thank you for bringing Titan." Her voice was small but clear. "He makes the hospital feel less scary." In the hallway, Dr. Chen consulted her notes, a new energy in her movements. "That's the most Zoe has spoken since admission," she said, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. "Her parents have been beside themselves with worry about her withdrawal, and this connection with Titan seems to have opened a door." James nodded, processing what had just happened. The training had prepared him for many aspects of this work, but not for the emotional impact, not for the way a child's simple gratitude could resonate so deeply. "Our next patient is very different," Dr. Chen continued as they walked. "Alex is 14, here for long-term cancer treatment. He's what we call a frequent flyer. Multiple hospital stays over the past 2 years. Excellent attitude considering his circumstances, but he's been struggling with the isolation lately. His immune system is compromised, so visitor restrictions are strict." As they approached room 427, James felt a mix of anticipation and concern. He couldn't help but recall the countless hours he had spent training Titan for patrol work. But this was an entirely different arena, one that required emotional intelligence and empathy, skills that had never been part of his regular duties. A nurse emerged from the room, smiling when she spotted them. "Perfect timing," she said. "Alex just finished his morning treatment and could use a distraction." The teenager sitting up in bed looked thin but alert, a colorful beanie covering what James assumed was hair loss from chemotherapy. A gaming console rested in his lap. Paused mid-action, a clear indication he had been trying to occupy his time during treatment. "Whoa, actual police dog," Alex exclaimed, his face lighting up. "This is way cooler than the therapy golden retrievers they usually bring in. No offense to golden retrievers." "None taken," James replied with a chuckle. "Titan has his own special skills." Dr. Chen made introductions, and James was struck by the contrast between this visit and the last. Where Zoe had been withdrawn and hesitant, Alex was immediately engaged, full of questions about Titan's training, his police work, and the cases he'd helped solve. Can he detect drugs? Has he ever taken down a bad guy? Does he wear a bulletproof vest on duty? Does he have his own badge? The questions flew out of him, an eager stream of curiosity. James answered each question patiently, impressed by the boy's knowledge of police K-9 units. "You seem to know a lot about police dogs," he observed, genuinely intrigued. Alex shrugged, the movement causing his IV line to shift slightly. "I watch a lot of cop shows. Not much else to do in here sometimes. Plus, My uncle works for the sheriff's department in the next county over. There was a hint of pride in his voice, a connection that seemed to ground him despite the circumstances. As the conversation continued, James noticed something remarkable happening. Titan, who had maintained professional distance with Zoe until invited closer, had moved to stand directly beside Alex's bed without prompting. The dog's posture was alert but relaxed, his attention focused entirely on the teenager as if he understood every word. "He's different from what I expected," Alex commented, reaching out to stroke Titan's head. "On TV, police dogs always look super intense, ready to bite someone. But he seems, I don't know, chill? He adapts to different situations," James explained, watching the interaction with interest. "That's part of his training. He can be intense when the job requires it, but right now, his job is just to be here with you." Alex considered this, absently running his fingers through Titan's fur. "That's kind of like me, I guess. Different versions for different situations. Hospital Alex is different from school Alex." The insight, delivered so casually, struck James with its wisdom. "That's a good way of putting it," he agreed. "We all have different sides we show in different places." "Yeah, but the trick is remembering which one is the real you," Alex said, a flash of something older and wiser crossing his young face. "My therapist says that's important. Not losing yourself in all the different versions." Before James could respond, Titan did something unexpected. The German shepherd gently placed his paw on the edge of the bed, not quite touching Alex, but close enough to draw attention. When the boy looked down, Titan held his gaze steadily, his brown eyes filled with a gentle understanding that seemed to communicate without words. Alex laughed, the sound bright in the sterile room. "I think he's telling me to stop being so deep and philosophical." "Or maybe he's agreeing with you," James suggested, equally surprised by Titan's gesture. "He's pretty smart that way." As they prepared to leave, Alex asked if they could take a photo, together. "For my Instagram," he explained. "None of my friends will believe a police dog came to visit unless I have proof." Dr. Chen checked the parental consent forms quickly, then nodded her approval. James positioned Titan beside the bed, while Alex held up his phone, capturing a selfie with all three of them, the excitement evident in their expressions. "This is definitely going to get more likes than my last chemo update," Alex declared, already typing a caption. "Thanks for the visit, officers. You guys should come back when I'm having a bad day. This was definitely a good one." In the hallway, James paused to give Titan a drink of water from a collapsible bowl he carried in his kit. As the dog drank, Dr. Chen reviewed her notes. 2 for 2, she remarked. Different patients, different needs, equally positive responses. She looked up from her clipboard. "I know this program is still experimental, Officer Reeves, but I have to say, Titan seems to have a natural gift for this work. He's connecting with these children in ways our regular therapy dogs sometimes take weeks to achieve." James watched his partner, thinking about the hidden pocket, about the warehouse, about Max at the fair. "I think he understands more than we give him credit for," he said simply, feeling a swell of pride. Their final visit of the day was to the pediatric oncology playroom, where several children were gathered for a group activity. Among them, James immediately recognized a familiar face. Max's cousin, the connection Sarah Peterson had mentioned in her text. The boy was smaller than the others, his complexion pale, but his eyes brightened at the sight of Titan. "You're the dog from the fair," he exclaimed. "Max told me all about you." As the children gathered around, their excitement palpable, James watched Titan move among them with gentle confidence. The dog seemed to know instinctively which children needed more space, which ones craved closer contact, and which ones were nervous despite their curiosity. One little girl, no more than 5, hung back from the group, watching from behind a play kitchen set. James noticed Titan glancing in her direction repeatedly, as if aware of her hesitation. "That's Lily," Dr. Chen whispered. "New admission, very shy. Diagnosed just last week." After a few minutes of interaction with the more enthusiastic children, Titan did something that made James catch his breath. The dog gently disengaged from the group and walked slowly, deliberately toward the play kitchen where Lily hid. Instead of approaching directly, he lay down a few feet away, his head on his paws, making himself smaller, less intimidating. The atmosphere in the playroom fell quiet as the other children watched this silent interaction. After what seemed like an eternity, Lily emerged from behind the plastic stove, taking 2 hesitant steps forward, then stopping. Titan remained perfectly still, patient, waiting, his body language exuding calmness. Another step, then another. When she finally reached him, her small hand hovering uncertainly above his head, Titan closed his eyes briefly, a signal of trust and submission that James recognized from their training. "It's okay," James said softly. "He'd like to be your friend." Lily's fingers made contact with Titan's fur, and a tiny smile, perhaps the first since her diagnosis, curved her lips. As the other children began to cheer her on, encouraging her to pet Titan, James felt a warmth spread through him. The simple act of connection, so fundamental yet so powerful, was unfolding before him. It was a reminder of why he had joined the force in the first place: to make a difference, to help others in moments of vulnerability. As they left the hospital later that afternoon, James found himself processing the events of the day. Each interaction had been unique, each child responding to Titan in different ways. Yet a common thread connected them all. A moment of genuine connection, a brief respite from the clinical reality of hospital life. In the car, Titan settled into his compartment with a contented sigh. James glanced at him in the rearview mirror, still somewhat amazed by what he had witnessed. "You did good today, partner," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "Really good." His phone buzzed with a text from Captain Reynolds. How did it go? James considered how to respond. The official report would come later, with metrics and observations and recommendations. But for now, he typed a simple reply. Titan was exactly where he needed to be today. We both were. As they drove back toward the station, James couldn't help but think about the hidden pocket, about the small button that had started this journey. What had begun as a private memorial had somehow evolved into something much larger. A bridge between Titan's traditional police work and this new territory they were exploring together. New territory indeed, James thought, feeling the excitement of the unknown ahead. And yet, somehow, it felt like they were exactly where they belonged. The potential for growth, for connection, and for healing was palpable. And as they moved forward in this new chapter, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. James knew that this was just the beginning. They had taken the first steps into a world that would challenge them both in ways they had yet to understand, but together, he and Titan would navigate it, one paw at a time. With every visit, every interaction, they would not only be healing others, but also discovering deeper layers of strength, compassion, and understanding within themselves. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the landscape, James felt a sense of optimism wash over him. This journey held promise, not just for the children they would meet, but for their own evolving partnership. Titan was more than just a police dog. He was a bridge to new possibilities, a companion on a path toward healing that neither had anticipated. And together, they would continue to explore the uncharted territory ahead.